Hello, everyone. This is Karen Cox, and I'm coming to you with another episode of Austen in August, which is hosted by the Book Rat. It's a month-long celebration of everything Jane that is she does every year, and it's fabulous. So I'm very happy to be here. And today, for my presentation, I guess is the right word for it, I'm going to read to you one of my favorite scenes from Emma, which is a scene at the Christmas party. And I feel like as I read Emma, this is the first glimpse that readers are given of Emma and George Knightley as a partnership, as of the connection that's between them, and how it's special. And so I'm going to read that. And then afterwards, I'm going to read the complementing scene in my Emma adaptation, which takes place in the 1970s, called I Could Write a Book. All right, so here we go with Emma. Emma saw Mrs. Weston's surprise and felt that it must be great at an address which, in words and manner, was assuming to himself the right of first interest in her. And as for herself, she was too much provoked and offended to have the power of directly saying anything to the purpose. She could only give him a look, but it was such a look as she thought must restore him to his senses, and then left the sofa, removing to a seat by her sister and giving her all the attention. She had not time to know how Mr. Elton took the reproof, so rapidly did another subject succeed. For Mr. John Knightley now came into the room from examining the weather and opened on them all with the information of the ground being covered with snow, and of it still snowing fast, and with a strong drifting wind, concluding with these words to Mr. Woodhouse: "This will prove a spirited beginning of your winter engagement, sir. Something new for your coachman and horses to be making their way through a storm of snow." Poor Mr. Woodhouse was silent from consternation, but everybody else had something to say. Everybody was either surprised or not surprised, and had some question to ask or some comfort to offer. Mrs. Weston and Emma tried earnestly to cheer him and turn his attention from his son in law, who was pursuing his triumph rather unfeelingly. "I admired your resolution very much, sir," said he, "in venturing out in such weather, for of course you saw there would be snow very soon. Everybody must have seen the snow coming on. I admired your spirit, and I dare say we shall get home very well. Another hour or two's snow can hardly make the road impassable, and we are two carriages. If one is blown over in the bleak part of the common field, there will be the other at hand. I dare say we shall be all safe at Hartfield before midnight." Mr. Weston, with triumph of a different sort, was confessing that he had known it to be snowing some time, but had not said a word, lest it should make Mr. Woodhouse uncomfortable, and be an excuse for his hurrying away. As to there being any quantity of snow fallen or likely to fall to impede their return, that was a mere joke. He was afraid they would find no difficulty. He wished the road might be impassable, that he might be able to keep them all at Randall's, and with the utmost goodwill was sure that accommodation might be found for everybody, calling on his wife to agree with him that, with a little contrivance, everybody might be lodged, which she hardly knew how to do from the consciousness of there being but two spare rooms in the house. "What is to be done, my dear Emma? What is to be done?" was Mr. Woodhouse's first exclamation, and all that he could say for some time. To her he looked for comfort, and her assurances of safety, her representation of the excellence of the horses, and of James, and of their having so many friends about them, revived him a little. His eldest daughter's alarm was equal to his own. The horror of being blocked up at Randall's, while her children were at Hartfield, was full in her imagination, and fancying the road to be now just passable for adventurous people, but in a state that admitted no delay, she was eager to have it settled that her father and Emma should remain at Randall's while she and her husband set forward instantly through all the possible accumulations of drifted snow that might impede them. You had better order the carriage directly, my love, said she. I dare say we shall be able to get along if we set off directly, and if we do come to anything very bad, I can get out and walk. I am not at all afraid. I should not mind walking half the way. I could change my shoes, you know, the moment I got home, and it is not the sort of thing that gives me cold. Indeed, replied he, then, my dear Isabella, it is the most extraordinary sort of thing in the world, for in general everything does give you cold. Walk home. You are prettily shod for walking home, I dare say. It will be bad enough for the horses. Isabella turned to Mrs. Weston for her approbation of the plan. Mrs. Weston could only approve. Isabella then went to Emma, but Emma could not so entirely give up the hope of their being all able to get away, and they were still discussing the point when Mr. Knightley, who had left the room immediately after his brother's first report of the snow, came back again and told them that he had been out of doors to examine and could answer for there not being the smallest difficulty in their getting home whenever they liked it, either now or an hour hence. He had gone beyond the sweep, some way along the Highbury road. The snow was nowhere above half an inch deep, in many places hardly enough to whiten the ground. A very few flakes were falling at present, but the clouds were parting, and there was every appearance of its being soon over. He had seen the coachman, and they both agreed with him in there being nothing to apprehend. To Isabella, the relief of such tidings was very great, and they were scarcely less acceptable to Emma on her father's account, who was immediately set as much at ease on the subject as his nervous constitution allowed. But the alarm that had been raised could not be appeased so as to admit of any comfort for him while he continued at Randall's. He was satisfied of there being no present danger in returning home, but no assurances could convince him that it was safe to stay. And while the others were variously urging and recommending, Mr. Knightley and Emma settled it in a few brief sentences thus: Your father will not be easy. Why do not you go? I am ready, if the others are. Shall I ring the bell? Yes, do. And the bell was rung, and the carriage is spoken for. Okay, I'm going to pause for just a second. Okay, so that was from the annotated Emma, which is from David Shepard. And if you aren't familiar with his annotations, they're really very, very good. I have them for most of Jane's books. I know I have it for Pride and Prejudice, for Emma, for Northanger Abbey, for Persuasion, I think. So if you're in the market for something like that, this is a good one. Okay, so the next scene that I'm going to read you is a scene from my I Could Write a Book, which is a variation of Emma that takes place in the 1970s. Again, we're going to read this Christmas scene, the one that kind of shows that connection between George Knightley and Emma. At this particular party, George has brought his new girlfriend to the party. As they walked away, Nina whispered, "What do you think of George's new gal?" "Well, she's got more substance than his typical Woman of the Month Club member." "Emma, what a thing to say!" "George Knightley is the poster child for serial daters anonymous, except he's not so anonymous these days. He's fast developing a reputation for having commitment phobia. Why, just the other day, I stopped to look up at the man looming over me. I'm not interrupting, am I? Then Tim Elton sat right down between us. Good. He paused a beat. Emma, is there something I can get your father? I'm sure he's very comfortable. Are you sure? Because he sounds a bit upset. What? I listened, and sure enough, I heard Daddy's strained and anxious tone coming from the other room. I'd been so engrossed in discussing George's love life, I'd tuned Daddy completely out. Excuse me, I said, rising and handing my glass to Tim. Well, the snow's fallen thick as blackberries in July. I must say, John, I admire your chutzpah in braving the elements this evening. Roads must be getting slick about now. Jack was standing at the window, staring out into the dark. Having his back to the room, he didn't see the alarm that bloomed over Daddy's expression. What's that you say, Jack? Really? Do you think the roads are slick? Isabel? Dolores's car doesn't drive well in the snow. We're liable to go off the road in a ditch somewhere. Maybe we should go now, before it gets too bad. I was ready to punch Jack Knightley right after I finished disposing of Tim Elton. Isabel sat beside Daddy, patting his hand. I don't know. I mean, it's snowing, but I don't know how bad the roads actually are. Her anxiety was only slightly below our father's. Jack, maybe we should think about going home. I would hate to be stuck here and have the children over at Hartfield alone with just Rita, especially if the weather's going to get bad. What if the electricity goes out? Daddy wrung his hands. Suddenly, this impulsive adventure seemed disastrous to him, even if it was a respite from the consternation and noise of his beloved grandbabies. Nina came into the room as the voices got louder. I'm sure it will be fine, John. Bob Weston, seeing his wife's concern, joined in the fray. I saw that it was snowing, but I didn't say anything so as not to upset John. Jack turned from the window, taken aback by all the angst in the room, especially from his father-in-law and his wife, as well as my scowl. I'll take you all home if you like. Suits me just fine to get back to Hartfield Road at a decent hour. But what if we slide off the road? Emma, Daddy turned to me for solace. I opened my mouth to soothe, to reassure, but before I could say a word, Isabel piped in. If we slide off the road, I'll just walk the rest of the way and bring back the truck to get you. It's not far. Isabel, walk? In the dark? In the cold? Daddy shook his head. You'll catch your death. It's highly unlikely that Isabel's life will be at risk. Jack set his coffee on the sideboard and then added, but it's less likely the sooner we leave. I think I want to go home. I'm getting very worried now. Yes, I think we should go. I really think we should. I sighed. Daddy was starting to perseverate. Jack, not living with him since the stroke, didn't understand what he'd started with that one thoughtless comment. Safety, or rather the fear of not being safe, was Daddy's numero uno worry. George walked in the door, coat and gloves on, snowflakes sticking to that wavy brown hair. I've checked the weather, taken a quick peek at the roads. You went out in the storm just to check the roads? Daddy was incredulous. Yes, sir. Drove up the driveway too. It's not a winter storm at all. The roads are certainly passable, and the heavy snow isn't coming till way after midnight. You'll be just fine, sir, whether you leave now or an hour from now. I think I want to go home. But George says the roads are fine, so the roads are fine. Right, my dear? Daddy looked at me as if I was the only one who could save him. It about broke my heart. George always tells you the absolute truth, Daddy. It's okay. We'll leave pretty soon. I want you to enjoy the party and don't worry about a thing. I'll take care of it. I kissed his cheek. Just don't worry, okay? Yes, you're right. It will be fine. George said so. Nina distracted him with a new antique roll-top desk she'd found the week before, but he continued to mutter to himself, It will be all right. It's fine. I glanced over at George, smiled, and mouthed, Thank you. He walked over and leaned down to murmur in my ear, smelling of delicious sandalwood and the cold outdoors. I'm afraid he won't be at ease until all four of you are home safe and sound. You're probably right. I should take him home. He won't enjoy himself, and the others aren't sure how to handle him when he's like this. I know you'd like to stay a bit longer. I looked up at him and read his expression perfectly. No, don't you dare pity me, George. I, I'm not. He is not a burden to me. He's a gift. You're right, of course. He's my father, and it's my choice to care for him for as long as I can. I know. You're a good girl, Emma Kate. I'm not feeling sorry for you. Good. Just admiring your heart. I'll get your coat. George so rarely complimented me. It warmed my insides like the eggnog I'd had an hour before. I turned toward the window to collect myself and saw the frank, assessing stare from Julianne Ryman, who had apparently watched the entire interchange from across the room. Okay, so yes, maybe Julianne's thinking Emma and George are closer than she imagined. Um, and they are. So I just wanted to say thank you. I'm going to, in the little post at Austen in August at the Book Rat, there's going to be a link there to a Google folder that has some desktop and wallpapers and phone wallpapers that are, of course, Austen themed that I've made to say thanks again for joining us for this celebration of Jane Austen. Um, I made, I had some that I did for the Austen Through the Ages post that I did back earlier in the month, but I've added a couple of Emma ones, so you can take a look at those. Um, okay, well, thanks again for coming by, and I hope you enjoyed the reading, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.